Okay, this is the second video of derivation examples with complex conditionals and modus ponens. So, good, let's get going. We'll say show conclusion, it's y, so we know that once we get y by itself, we can box and cancel with direct derivation, so we want to have our I out for y. We don't have it yet though, we have premise 1 and premise 2. Okay, so our only rule is modus ponens, so we want to see if we can do MP anywhere. So we look at line 2, it's a conditional. So if we can get its antecedent, we can do modus ponens. And you might think, oh, by the way, its consequent is y, so it would be nice if I could do modus ponens with line 2, because if I did, then I would get y, and that's what I need to finish the derivation. So that would be good. What do we need to do modus ponens with line 2? Well, we need its antecedent, and the antecedent of line 2 is, what is it? It's x. So for modus ponens with line 2, we need x. Do we have x? We don't. So no modus ponens with line 2, at least not yet. Well, let's look at line 3. Line 3 is also a conditional, so if we can get its antecedent, we can do modus ponens. Okay. Well, what is the antecedent of line 3? Why, it's if x, then y. And that's what we have on line 2. So on line 3, we have a conditional, and on line 2, we have the antecedent of that conditional. What do we need for modus ponens? A conditional and its antecedent. So what we have on lines 2 and 3 is what we need for modus ponens. And when we apply modus ponens, we'll get the consequent of the big conditional, so we'll get x. Okay, now, what do we want to do with x? Well, the only thing we can do with it is make it interact with our old lines. So we want to see if we can make it interact with our old lines. Well, line 3, we've done modus ponens with line 3 and we got its consequent. So we're probably not going to use line 3 again. When you use modus ponens with the line, with a conditional, and in order to get that conditional as consequent, you're probably not going to use it again. But in any case, we can't make 4 and 3 interact with modus ponens because 4 is not the antecedent of line 3. So 3 and 4 modus ponens is out because 4 is not the antecedent of line 3. What about with line 2? Well, line 2 is a conditional. Its antecedent is x, and that's what we have on line 4. So in fact, we can do modus ponens with line 2 and 4. So we can say 2, 4, MP, and we get y. And hey, that's what we want for our conclusion. So on line 5, we have the conclusion of line 1, so we can say 5, direct derivation. So this is slightly tricky, right? Because we use line 2 twice. First, we say, aha, line 2, well, let's have this. This is important. Line 2 is the, what? It's the antecedent of another conditional. And then also, then later on, we get the antecedent of line 2. So first we use line 2 with another bigger conditional, where it's the antecedent of the bigger conditional, and then we use line 2 again, where we get its antecedent, and it's the big conditional. So we want to look out for that. Once we're working with complex conditionals, we can use the same conditional in two different ways. We can use it as a big conditional and get its consequent if we also have its antecedent, or it might be the antecedent of an even bigger conditional, and it could even be both. We can use it in both ways, and that's what we do here. We use line 2 both as the antecedent of a bigger conditional, namely the conditional on line 3, and then we turn around and say, aha, now I have the antecedent of line 2, so I can turn around and apply modus ponens to line 2 again, where this time line 2 is the big conditional. Okay, so it's important to see that we can do these two different things with the same line. Okay, let's look at another example. This will be the last one. Okay, so we'll say show conclusion. We'll say premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and there is no premise 4. Okay, so here we have, again, we want to look for the modus ponens applications. So we've got a conditional on line 2. It's if x, then y. So its antecedent is x. So if we get its antecedent, namely x, we can apply modus ponens. And that's exactly what we have on line 3. We have a conditional on line 2. We have its antecedent on line 3. So we'll say 2, 3, MP, and we get y. Good. We're probably, who knows, maybe we'll use either of those again. Can we use y? Actually, no. There's nothing we can do with y right now. Y, the only thing we could do with y is if it was the antecedent of another conditional, we could apply modus ponens. But we only have two conditionals, the conditional on line 2 and the conditional on line 4, and the antecedent of neither of them is x. So this time we're not going to use our new line yet. That's kind of weird, but that's the way it goes. We've used line 2. We've done modus ponens where it's the big conditional, so we're probably not going to use line 2 again. Line 3 is not a conditional, so maybe we'll use line 3 in combination with something else, but it's not going to be the big conditional for modus ponens. Line 4 is another conditional, though, and so we should ask, can we do modus ponens with it? Well, we need its antecedent. And what is the antecedent of line 4? It's x. And do we have x anywhere? Yes, we do. We have x on line 3. So we have a conditional on line 4, and the antecedent of that conditional on line 3. So we can say 3 for modus ponens, and we get the consequent of line 4. And now we get if y then z. So now we want to think, well, can we use if y then z? Well, only rule we have that works with it is modus ponens, so we need its antecedent. Its antecedent is y, and in fact we have its antecedent on line 5. We have a conditional on line 6, and its antecedent on line 5, so we can say 5, 6 modus ponens, and hooray, we're good to go. We've got our z. So, what can we do with z? Well, z is our conclusion. It's what we're looking for, so we can say 7 direct derivation, and we are good. So, in this case, this is also a little bit new because when we use this line 3 twice. We haven't done that before. And also, when we get our new line, we don't actually use that first new line we get, line 5. We don't use it right away. We get it, and then we wait to use it. First, we get y, and then we use old lines again. First, we use 2 and 3, and then we use 3 and 4. And then with these two new lines, we put them together, and we get z. So you want to also say, well, sometimes we don't use the new line right away. Sometimes we work with our old lines for a bit, and then we use our new lines. So you don't always use the new line right away. And that's because sometimes two of your premises will interact, and then also there'll be another interaction with at least one other premise. And so you get all that out first, and then you get enough new lines, and then you can do something with them. Okay, good. So those are the slightly more complex derivations, slightly more complex derivation structure. We want to remember, okay, sometimes we'll use a conditional twice. It will be the big conditional for modus ponens when we get its antecedent. And then also, we may also use it as the antecedent of an even bigger conditional. And then we want to remember here, we don't always use the new lines right away. So there you go. If you have any questions, please let me know. Good luck deriving.